Heyo, Tish here. We're back with part 2 of how to use every class in Rabbit and Steel. This is the second part of this series, so if you're interested in seeing how to use every starting class, you can check the first part. But in this second part, we'll be covering all of the unlockable characters that are in the base game. So we're not going to be covering the extra classes in this one. I'll cover it in the next part. So if you haven't seen this series yet, what I cover is the ability rotations, the core mechanics, and things you should know about every class. So with that said, let's get started. Alright, first up we have the Spellsword Rabbit. So the rotation for Spellsword is something like this. Your secondary, your defensive, your special, and then your primary. Now, you might notice I'm using my primary again, but it doesn't look the same as it did before. And that's because of Spellsword's core mechanic, which is Dark Spell. So as you can see, what Dark Spell does is that so long as you have this status, all your abilities will hit twice. So a status does not count as a buff. So don't confuse this with some loot that states that, oh, if you have a buff, you'll get another effect. It doesn't count. Same thing goes for Charge, Supercharge, and Omega Charge. They count as statuses, not buffs. Now, the reason why this is important is because if you don't have Dark Spell when you're using Spellsword, you're just losing out on half your damage. So to get Dark Spell, you have to use your secondary. Your secondary will give you at base 5 Dark Spell, and for every use, as you can see, even if I'm not hitting the target, I'm depleting Dark Spell. So I don't want to just use this willy-nilly. I want to use my secondary and make sure I have pretty much full uptime on Dark Spell, so that way all my attacks will hit twice, like this. Now, you'll notice that with the special, it has 3 uses, and it gains 3 uses per cooldown. So you really want to use your special pretty much immediately and make sure that you don't overcap. So it'll look something like this. So I want to use them all because I'll cast my secondary here to get some Dark Spell back. I can even cast it again here while there's some downtime. I get my uses back, and then I can continue attacking. Now, as for the abilities that slow movement, the only one that slows your movement is your secondary, and it's pretty significant. So you want to be aware of this. You want to use it when you don't have to move too much, because depending on, if there's a laser or like an orb that you need to move quickly out of, you don't want to be caught using your secondary, slowing you down and potentially getting you hit. Now, you'll notice with the special, it's pretty unique in that it's essentially a laser itself. So you can see that I can place it here and it'll shoot. And the reason why I want to use it pretty much as possible or as soon as it's off cooldown is so that way I get the most damage out of it and start that cooldown timer as quickly as possible to keep my special uptime very good. Now, because Spellsword has such a good special in terms of frequency, the special lends very well to loot such as the, Book of Cheats, which, as you can see, your special will give you random chaotic effects, and these random chaotic effects are all buffs. So you can see it just synergizes very well here. I'm just getting a bunch of buffs for essentially free for just using the character. So what I would recommend is for the upgrades, Spellsword I find is very good damage output. I pretty much don't struggle with damage output when I use Spellsword because of the loot. The variety of loot that you can use with this class, as well as the upgrades, are just very versatile. So you can see, like, for the defensive here, it grants Hex, which is a debuff that makes the enemy take 10% more damage. And what you can do is you can upgrade this to even have a stronger debuff. You can change it, decreasing the cooldown, You can even do damage with it. You can, like, it's just very flexible. Like, and even more debuffs like Poison Hex here. So, very interesting stuff. Now, for Dark Spell, you'll notice that some of the upgrades will change how much Dark Spell you consume. So, I would say you want to be a bit careful with these because the quicker you consume your Dark Spell, the more that you have to use your secondary to get Dark Spell back. So depending on your build, you might have issues with your Dark Spell uptime. Now, with the upgrades that increase the amount of Dark Spell consumed, there are also secondary upgrades that provide effects depending on how much Dark Spell you have when you use that secondary. So for example, the Emerald one here is really nice because as long as you're attacking, it'll automatically cast your secondary for you. So this is pretty much if you don't want to, worry about your uptime, you can just let the Emerald one do it for you. But there's also interesting ones here, like the Ruby secondary, which says that if you have no Dark Spell, its damage is increased by 4 times. As you can see, that's a lot of damage. If I, go through it and just deplete this right now. Okay, I have 0, and I cast again. I get a lot of damage output. But if I try to cast it now when I have Dark Spell, it does very little damage. So these are things you just have to be aware of when you're using using Spellsword. Next up, we have the Sniper Rabbit. So the Sniper Rabbit doesn't have as strict of a rotation, but it can go something like this. So you can use your secondary, your defensive, your special, and then like your primary. So the reason why I did it in that order is because of the secondary here. So the secondary provides a debuff called Snare, which will deal damage and reset your special upon wearing off. So this is important because what you want to do is that if you cast it early, you start that cooldown timer much earlier. And then once it ticks, I get a reset and I get another use back. Now, unlike Spellsword from earlier, this special does not gain 3 uses per cooldown. It gains 1 per cooldown. So I'll just use it here. Okay, I have none. I'll apply that snare debuff. So I'll get 1 use passively, get another from the reset, and then that cooldown timer will just continue again until I get my 3rd use back. The defensive I used early because it supercharges your primary. Supercharges can be saved. So, okay, I have 1 charged use right here, but I believe you can save it unless it runs out. In this case, let's see. It does run out, huh? Actually. I actually didn't realize it runs out because it doesn't seem to be actually stated that it does. But yeah, you do want to use your primary when it's supercharged. Now you'll notice that the primary, it will reset when you land the shot. But if you miss, then it goes on that 4-second cooldown, which really sucks. So you really want to make sure that you hit this primary when you're using it. What I will say though, is Sniper is a bit finicky. I find that Sniper can struggle with damage output sometimes because of the limited damage window. So sometimes with Sniper, you'll be at you'll be like on cooldown with your special. You've already used it, and then you're not in a position to use your primary to land the hit because you'll miss. The alternative then would be to use the secondary, because the secondary is aimed. You don't have to worry about missing it. But the issue with the secondary is that it doesn't do very much damage, and this is a debuff. So you'll notice when I apply Snare, when I apply it multiple times, it's not changing the cooldown. It has to wait. So you don't want to use this secondary very often. this is where I want to mention like debuffs and like frequency of application. So some debuffs don't want to be applied in quick succession. They want to be applied at like a fairly consistent rate. So for example, curse here, when you apply it, it gives curse for 5 seconds. So you essentially, during that, if you use the secondary, you know, again, you're not getting any value. You're just dealing the base damage, and the snare damage will remain the same. So what you want to do is that you want to give abilities debuffs that start and end when they go off cooldown. So in this case, if this, for example, this loot has a 5-second curse application, I want to use it. I want to have it on an ability that I will presumably use at least every 5 seconds, because otherwise I am just missing out on damage when I'm not using it. So in this case, yeah, this would be a good example of a well-applied loot, because I'm going to apply the secondary every 5 seconds because of snare. So it's great for that reason. Now, another quirk with the Sniper Rabbit here is that you'll see that the primary does slow you down, the secondary does slow you down, the special does not, and the defensive can help you get your mobility because it gives you a momentary like speed boost. It's pretty minor compared to like Assassin's Vanish or Flutter Step from Druid, but it is something, and it can provide some useful effects, such as, well, this one, you know, lowers your movement speed, which honestly I'm not a fan of this, but Sniper does have some upgrades that, for example, benefit from not moving too much, like Tranquility here. Like, you don't want to move so much that you see this circle, as I'm moving, it's getting smaller and smaller until it wears off. So I think, personally, this Emerald defensive is like less debilitating than just a straight up movement decrease. But yeah, you can get stuff like Vanish, like overcharging your primary if you want to go for like a primary build, or just like, you know, supercharging both of them and getting some lowered cooldown. Now, the quirk that I want to mention earlier was with the special. I find that Sniper's special can whiff quite a bit. So what Sniper's special does is, whoever you're targeting, it will essentially fix this area and it will shoot those 3 shots. The issue with that is that if the target moves outside of where you targeted, so like, let's say I'm here, and then the boss moves to the left here. If the boss moves to the left while I use my special, the special is going to target this dummy. It's going to target where this dummy was, but the boss is over here now, so my special just whiffed itself. So personally, because compared to Spellsword, the special does not have as strict of a like, you have to use your special pretty much immediately, or like as soon as possible, because you want that cooldown timer to start, and you want to make sure that you've used all of your special uses before it resets. You get all those 3 uses back. So what you can do with this special is save it for when you know for sure it will hit the boss, because otherwise you're just losing out on a lot of damage. And while I really like the primary for this class, there is times where you just don't have an opening to use it. Like if you're, for example, like the boss is in the middle of the screen here, but for whatever reason you're being pushed down to the bottom of the screen, you can't use it. You're just not getting any effect out of it. There is an upgrade that allows targeting. For example, this one, the Garnet's one. Yeah, so this one's like aimed, which is not bad, right? So I would recommend for Sniper, you really want to get upgrades as soon as possible, because otherwise your damage personally is honestly a little low. So you definitely want to focus on, yeah, getting some upgrades, either your primary or your special, something like that. Like for example, the emerald one here consumes all uses of it, so this is really good. I do like this because it gives some great burst damage, but you definitely want to be weary of you know, making sure that that special hits. It's just really nice that for the emerald one you can consume all the uses at once. So if you're certain that your special will connect, then being able to use it all at once means that you don't have to worry about using each of those individual uses later on. Next up, we have Bruiser. So Bruiser is personally one of my favorite classes to use, and a rotation is very simple. For example, you can use your special, your primary, and then use your secondary here until you have a charged primary. So Bruiser's core mechanic is the special here, which provides the Berserk buff. So what Berserk does is it gives you a fixed GCD of 0.8 seconds. This means that you cannot decrease this GCD any further with other loot. So just keep in mind, like for example, you don't want to take something like haste because it does not change the GCD. For example, like this Windbite dagger here, it doesn't change it. At least like, okay, 0.5 seconds now. But as you can see, when I berserked, it went back to 0.8. So that's kind of, you don't really want to take something like this because you'll only have that shortened GCD while you're not berserked, which is counterintuitive because berserk increases your movement speed and mobility. So this is really important because what this does is make Bruiser very flexible. For example, I'll take this emerald secondary here. It stops your movement straight up. So if I use it right now, you can see this is really bad. I'm holding it down right now and I'm not moving at all. This is really bad for obvious reasons, because if you need to, avoid bullets, you can't move. But the second you enter Berserk, you can still move. It pretty much ignores it. And this is fantastic because the Emerald one, for example, the Emerald Special here, gives you 25 seconds of what is essentially Berserk uptime. Abyssal Rage here is just a stronger Berserk because it also gives you a 40% damage increase. I will note that the special, Emerald Special here, essentially how it works is that it goes on cooldown for a very long time. So while you have this stop movement, you just want to tap. You don't want to hold this down, because if you hold this down, you want to make sure that you're not moving, because if you do need to move and you accidentally hit this, and you'll just get hit by a bullet. Now, an alternative rotation, you can see I'm already capped on charges here, but I'll just use it right now. 2, 3, 4. You can use your defensive in place to get those charges back, and I'm just wailing on the enemy right now, dealing frankly fantastic damage. Now, what I like about Bruiser is that Bruiser can, unlike, for example, like Heavy Blade, where Heavy Blade really relies on dealing like very consistent but not very high damage depending on your build, Bruiser is all about burst damage. So you'll see that the special here grants charges your primary twice and deals damage to all enemies. So it does slow you down a bit. You can see when I'm using it, but I get those 2 charges, and during that, essentially what I want to do is I want to have 2 charges ready, or do this to get 4 charges. So because the defensive will charge my primary once, the defensive here has 2 uses, 2 max uses. You gain 1 per every 8 seconds. So ideally, what you can do alternatively, if you're going to battle, you can double defensive special and then use your primary 4 times. And then I switched to my secondary because the secondary has a 30% chance to charge my primary. There is an upgrade, the Garnet one, that will always charge your primary. So this just adds a lot of consistency to make sure that when you're berserked, you get those 4 hits off. You can get, you switch to your secondary to get some charges back, and then use your primary once again. You'll notice that Bruiser, being a melee-focused character, has pretty short range. This secondary, I do find, as you can see, if you're just a little bit far away, yeah, it won't connect. The special pretty much hits everything on it hits everything on screen. So this is really useful for AoE fights like Subterra Sanctum or Churchmouth Streets. Taking the Garnet special, which just increases the damage that you deal with the special. Or, for example, the Sapphire one, which reduces its cooldown, adds a little bit of damage, making sure that you can use this special more frequently, increasing your Berserk uptime, which is really what you want to focus on with Bruiser, is just having high Berserk uptime. I personally haven't used the... I personally never bought the Ruby special because I just think it's just kind of bad. It gives you 3 supercharges, which, yes, it does backload your damage. But you definitely have to be more conscious of the character because, as you can see, like the other... It essentially outsources your Berserk to your other skills. As you can see, like, I'm not in Berserk right now. That's a very long GCD to go through, so you want to, like, secondary there to keep that uptime while you're spamming this, yeah, pretty much like this. Yeah, the primary does have quite good range, so if you're unable to use your, like, secondary, for example, or in this case, like, let me just remove the upgrades. But, yeah, in this case, like, if you can't connect with your secondary, your primary will probably connect. It'll slow you down, as you can see. So like you can use your secondary more safely, but if you need like damage, you need the range, then yes, you can use this primary to get the hits off. Now I will mention with Bruiser is that the defensive is pretty unique. So it grants invuln. You can see with the glowing red gem here. But it also pushes you in 3 rabbit leaps in the direction that you are holding. So like a rabbit leap is like 1, 2, 3. So if I use it here, you can see, yeah, it's pretty much I'm moving and then I'm moving that 3 rabbit leaps. You can use this. This is very nice because it allows you to reposition with Bruiser very easily, which other characters may not be able to do as safely. For example, like Heavy Blade does give you some brief invuln, but it's much shorter than this defensive here. So sometimes you can, if you move too far and you move into like a bullet or something, then you have no way of clearing it. There's like a brief, you'll have to abuse like the little invuln you have left to really step back. But with the defensive here, it also erases projectiles there in the direction that you can see that little wave there. So it's very nice, but I will say you need to be careful of using it because it will scare your teammates, because your teammates will see this you suddenly flying across the screen, and if there's like a spread out pattern, it freaks them out. I know from experience. There's also an upgrade that gives you just 4 uses of it every 18 seconds, so that's really nice. Really good stuff. Next up, we have the Defender Rabbit. So Defender Rabbit is also one of my personal favorites to use. And not gonna lie, when I was first using her, I didn't like her because she felt like a very difficult character to use. But over time, I learned how she works, and I find her a lot of fun. One of my favorites. So the reason why I found Defender hard to use is that you can see like she doesn't really have a fixed rotation. Essentially, her primary hits 3 times, and it charges your secondary once per use, and you can charge your secondary up to 5 times. So I do find this very reliable, but as you can see, it slows you down considerably. The secondary does not slow you down, and of course, you want to ideally use it while it's charged because you're just doing less damage otherwise. But you can also see that it hits in a line. It's not aimed. So it's a little iffy because it's Defender's only like ranged option. So if you whiff this, it's just not great. So what I personally like to use the secondary for is when I'm using the special or using the primary or the special. And let's say the boss is I'm very far away from the boss. I can't hit with any of these abilities. So while I have charges on my secondary, I'll just use it. And this does not slow me down, unlike my primary or my special. The special is really powerful because it's one of the safest options for clearing projectiles. And this is especially nice because as the class that is meant to defend things, she's really good at clearing projectiles, which is just helpful not only for you, but also your teammates. Because let's say that there's a bunch of daggers coming your way, and your teammates are behind you because, you know, you're probably in close range as a melee unit. And what you can do is, you know, passively defend your teammates by spamming that special when you have it. And you can store those uses. Now, I will say it's a little tricky to use this special like on the fly, in the sense that like you can't really panic use it because there is a little bit of wind up during the GCD. So like it doesn't happen immediately, the bullet clearing. So you need to be wary of that. Now, Defender also has a similar defensive in terms of movement like Bruiser, but it's even more powerful. So what it does is you roll it. It's pretty fast, and it grants invuln to you and a large boost to your movement speed. And after half a second, you'll stop in place and raise your shield. So this is exactly like how Heavy Blade works in terms of the shield that Defender places, except it's around her instead of just a field that is fixed in place. So I find this incredibly useful because, for example, like an unavoidable attack, you're maybe like either you or your teammates don't have like a shield ready. What you can do, at least to help your teammates, is if they have already used their defensive, they can't protect themselves, you can roll towards your teammates and protect them. Unlike Heavy Blade, where, for example, like if there is a knockback or whatnot, you know, if your teammates get knocked out of the field or you yourself get knocked out of your own field, then you're no longer invulnerable. But Defender just has that flexibility of being able to roll and really get moving. But I will say, yes, you do need knowledge of like what maps you're going into, because unlike Bruiser, where I feel like Bruiser just, you can use whatever you want and you have the mobility to survive. Either using your defensive to dodge like an attack that would have hit you, or using like the mobility that you get to quickly, react to things, or at least essentially the higher movement speed that you have, the more time that you have to react, because you have to move, you can move more, right? Defender doesn't really have that luxury, but I do find that Defender has some really fun options to use. I especially like taking, for example, like the Sapphire primary or the Emerald primary, which is really funny because it hits a ridiculous amount of times and it stores that damage. In the sense that, in this sense, it has a cooldown. So you can use it once and then it has a GCD, but then you can, focus on your other attacks as well. Sapphire one's a bit more flexible. You can use it more quickly and has a shorter GCD. Yeah, like this has a GCD of 2.5, so it's quite high. But you can stack this with like Black Wakizashi, and hopefully proc it. If your teammates have Rabbit Luck or you yourself have Rabbit Luck, you can just proc this very consistently and just churn out a lot of damage. So typically with Defender, I find I don't have issues with DPS. It usually has more to do with movement. Because if I take something like debilitating, like for example, let's say that's something that slows you down a lot. Yeah, like for example, a Dragon Head Spear here. It can be substantial. Let's see. In this case, I probably wouldn't take this because it adds a cooldown. But for example, say something like Club here. Club is really good, but the issue is that the movement penalty, and you really want to be careful with stacking movement penalties. This goes for every class, but especially for classes that have a lot of abilities that slow you down, you really don't want to compound this, because then it makes it nigh impossible to dodge some patterns. You really don't want that to happen. But yeah, you can see like definitely want to be careful with that. But otherwise, like I find Defender to be just a very powerful option in being the team player. Actually, lastly, we have the Ancient Rabbit. So the Ancient Rabbit has a new mechanic. As you can see, she has a summon. So this summon, the general rotation would be something like this. You want to use your secondary and then use your primary. Essentially, what you want to do is that your secondary commands your pet and to move towards the target, and they will stay there. You can see like right now, they're staying there, but they're not attacking. It's when I'm using my primary here that in this case, this primary specifically says that my pet will also deal damage in a radius around them. This, you can see, my range is, with the primary, is short. It's not connecting, but my summon is still connecting. And I can reposition my summon. The summon tends to reposition towards where you are. So you can have this like, you can try to position yourself, like for example, if there's like two bosses, like you can think of if there's like a boss here and a boss here, you could try to position this in the middle. And the reason why you want to use your secondary is because it also deals damage, and it's reducing the cooldown of your special by 4. And this special is your big damage window here. As you can see, it has a pretty big range, and it does a lot of damage. It's surrounding your summon, though. So if you miss, let's say that I'm over here, but then I use, like, if my summon is, not in the right place, then you'll just whiff the entire attack, and you'll lose out on a lot of damage. Now, let's say that I need to reposition my summon. What can I do in this case? Because I don't have a secondary use. My defensive will move my pet to me and keep them connected to me just like before. As you can see, they're moving along with me. And I can still attack with them during this time. And it gives me a use back of my secondary. So then I can, move them there. And if I want to reposition them. Oh, I want more damage. I can send them back, send them back in, get that special, and just keep going with the attacks. And what I really like about Ancient is that none of Ancient's attacks slow her down, really. The primary doesn't slow her down. The secondary doesn't slow her down. The special does a little. You can see like here. Yeah. There's a little bit of wind up there. But overall, if you can control the summon, there's upgrades like the, just dealing more damage, more cooldown reduction, hitting more times. This one makes it so that way only your pet is attacking, which I like to take because I just think it's really fun. And it's pretty easy to move, reposition your pet. And of course, your special is very important because it's essentially your big damage turn. You gain a lot of uses, you can stack stuff with it. It's just really versatile. Yeah. Really fun. Yeah, there's also rabbit, like, luck-based builds here too, with like the percentage chance, just dealing more damage. So I find like Ancient was one of the first characters that first class I used to clear, like my first hard run, because I just found like full clear because I just found her very flexible, just really good. You want to make sure that you use your secondary uses if you want to maximize on damage. If you want to save a use in case like the boss, for example, moves a lot, the boss is going to move, you can save a use, and in case of emergencies you can use your defensive, or even just use it very aggressively. Use all of your secondary uses and to get that cooldown down, and then use your special for that big damage window. Alright, so that is every unlockable class in the base game. I hope you've learned something from this, and part 3 will be coming out soon, hopefully. Probably within the next week, but we'll see. Alright, with that, this is Tish, signing off.